Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
G'day everyone, welcome to the show. Phil Tarrant here, editor of Smart Property Investment. Thanks for tuning in, joined by my regular co-host Vivian Kelly. Viv, how's it going?
I'm good, thanks Phil. How are you?
Good. So today, what we decided to do is bring back, by popular demand, one of our guests from earlier on in the year. You might remember, to our listeners, Stephanie Brennan joined us back in April, I think around the sort of 27th or so, episode number 22. If you want to familiarise yourself with Steph's story, sort of 5 months on, we thought, she was a pretty hungry property investor who had quite sort of ambitious plans to grow and evolve her portfolio in terms of overall wealth creation. So we've asked Steph to come back in to just really give us a bit of an update where she's been, what she's up to, and some of the stuff that might have changed within her strategy over that last 5 months or so. Obviously, property changes all the time. The strategy that you start with often isn't the strategy that you have today. And I think all good property investors understand that as your knowledge of property, your aptitude towards property investment, and just your confidence and capabilities in that space, often your strategy will evolve over time. My personal strategy, has it changed much since we started? Well, not really. We look for under market value properties in sort of affordable type of areas. We look to manufacture equity through renovation and then hold those. So we're still doing that, Viv, working really well. Where we started buying, where we identified those opportunities aren't there anymore. We've bought really well in those areas in the western suburbs of Sydney, but we're able to identify similar opportunities that are in line with our strategy up in the Queensland market, some other areas of Australia. So we're still doing the same thing, by and large. We're still staying true to our strategy, but we're getting a little bit more sophisticated in the type of stuff that we're buying as well. So Steph, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone really liked your story last time around. It was a really popular episode. So why do you think you were so popular?
It's a lofty question.
It is. Now, what do you think it is? This is obviously, our podcast, though, we keep this pretty raw, fly on the wall. So, Steph, we haven't really sort of said, this is what exactly we're going to talk about. But I guess the question is, obviously what you said resonated with people, and you're young, and, I'll talk about your age because you are young. I mean, I guess women are okay with talking about age if you're young. You're 25 years old and you've done really well. So, but something about your story really resonated with our listeners. Do you think it's the fact that you're just out there doing something, or you've been good at it? What do you think it is?
I think you've pinpointed the fact that I am young, and given that there's a lot of millennials in the demographic that we see, I think that enables people to resonate because, as you said, I'm out there, I'm doing it and showing them that it is possible. And also because I'm young and I'm still on my journey, we can actually journey together and learn and benefit from each other. A lot of the people that do come and seek my advice are people between sort of 25 and 45, but the main bulk are 25 to 35. And I think that's because we're the same age, and there's mistakes and things that I've done well, things that I've done not so well, and anybody that comes to me can learn from those mistakes. So I think that's why.
It's a good story as well, because personally, as a Gen Y / the much slated millennial generation, I am a bit sick of reading blogs about how irritating we are and how much we complain about property prices.
True,
it's not true, Phil. We are hard done by. But I think it's interesting that Steph has sort of just pushed that aside and gone out and invested. I do read a lot of blogs, Gen Y, stop whinging, go and do something, it's not that hard. And then you get the Gen Y pushback, it is that hard, blah, blah, blah. So I think Steph's just a good real life example of putting all that crap aside and just getting out and investing and being honest about what she's doing.
So it's not hard then? It's not hard?
It is hard if you don't know what you're doing. And there is a lack of knowledge and guidance in the market. So I think that's true. But it's not hard to do well in property, particularly in this Sydney market. And if you find the right professionals to engage with, then you will do well out of it. And so I think if you surround yourself with the right people, then it's not hard. But that's like anything. The expert in anything was once a beginner. And that's important to remember as well.
So when you were in last time, Steph, back in April on episode 22, the aim was 22 properties by the time you're 30, which is in about 5 years' time. So is that still the aim?
Definitely still the aim, but as Phil said, the strategy along the way does change. When I was last in here, my strategy was to buy and hold, and I still want to buy and hold some properties, but in order to be able to reach that goal by 30, I turned 26 in 2 weeks' time, so I've pressed for time now. I've got 4 more years to do that, so I wanted to change my strategy to enable me to get to that goal, certainly on time, but if not sooner.
So talk us through that strategy change then. What's changed and what are you doing now?
So what I'm doing now is looking at renovating and flipping, and then also looking at international markets as well. So there's two reasons that I want to do that. One that I've touched on, which is to reach my goal faster, but also because I've got a lot of clients that are coming to me wanting to buy internationally.
So sorry, just on the basis, so I think we talk about in episode 22, you've actually turned this into a business now, haven't you? Where you're helping other people sort of down this path of wealth creation.
Yes.
So you talk about clients being other people that you're
other
professionally
people that I'm
helping out now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So other clients are sort of coming to me and asking, about international property and also particularly renovating and flipping. And I sort of thought, I want to have first-hand experience in both of those things, because then I can really understand the challenges that they go through, and then also, I guess, work out what's the best strategy and way for people to implement going into different strategies in different markets.
So you didn't want to be sort of giving people advice on something that you had no experience on,
exactly.
I guess. So what's the renovating and flipping thing like? How's that working in practical terms? What are you out there doing?
For me, I started with one of the properties that I own in Manly, because I already had a lot of equity in that property, so it minimises my risk as the one that I'm trialling first. So I renovated that. It's now on the market, and we've got a couple of offers, but we're waiting to take it to auction. I'm also going and looking at a place in Bondi on the weekend, which hopefully I'll be successful at auction, and that'll be one that'll be a higher level renovation, taking out walls and things like that. I did another renovation on a place that I've just moved into, which was the first property I ever bought down in Manly Vale, and that was really good as well, because it was something that I could sort of dip my toe in without doing a full scale renovation, taking out walls. And so now I think I'm ready. I've done them pretty well, so now looking to get to that next level and start doing bigger scale things.
And do you renovate it yourself? Do you have a team of professionals, and how do you crunch the numbers? Are you just sort of knocking down walls and hoping for the best? Are you doing a bit of a Phil Tarrant and getting all your mates involved and paying them with beer, or how's it working, when it actually comes to the renovation?
So I found a really good builder that's really cost effective but does a really good job, and we've sort of structured the fact that if there's more capacity for him, then I can get a better deal because there's simply more work. A lot of the finding different vanities and pictures and things like that I'm doing myself. In terms of crunching the numbers, there's a lot to actually consider, even down to the little things, which are, new taps, new handles, new light fittings. It's the big things that you never miss. It's just those little things. So working out exactly what is actually in the property and then doing all the costs.
So Phil, you've done a bit of renovating yourself. Your Mount Druitt property, I think you renovated in a weekend.
That's right.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, full rent out on a weekend.
So what do you think about, all those little bits and bobs, in terms of finding the right tap and knocking down the right wall? How do you find your knowledge about that? And, you did it with a bunch of mates and a bunch of people from here. How did you find that process?
I really enjoy it. I like renovating. I think it's cool. I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. But there's two types of renovations. There's a renovation you do on the house that you want to live in and potentially raise kids in, all this sort of stuff. Then there's a renovation you do on an investment property, and they're two very, very different renovations. The actual process of doing it might be quite similar in terms of knocking down walls and sticking kitchens in or floors or painting and stuff, but the outcome that you're looking for in renovating an investment property is very different than what you would be renovating for a house that you live in. So my advice when you're renovating an investment property is forget absolutely everything you've ever seen on The Block or any of those other shows, and start with a spreadsheet. You need to understand when you're renovating investment property, why are you renovating investment property? Are you trying to increase the livability of the property? Absolutely. But why are you doing that? And the reason why is that you're spending money on it because you want to try and manufacture some equity. So if the property is worth 200 grand today and you can spend 20 grand on it and it becomes a $250,000 property, that's a good reason to be renovating. So capital growth, but also an increase in yield. So you need to make sure that any money that you spend on the investment property actually has a tangible return in immediate cash flow increases, but also long-term capital value. One of the biggest mistakes that people make renovating investment properties is they renovate it like it's probably they want to move into, and they overspend, overcapitalise is the right term for it. Whether that's they do the wrong type of renovation, like knocking down walls to make open spaces and losing bedrooms, which changes the market feasibility of a property, all the way through to spending way too much on different stuff. So, if you can put a $20 tap in or a $50 tap in, that's going to work and not break in the next 5 years. Why would you spend that versus spending something which is $400 or $4,000 on a tap, which might look really nice, but it does the same thing, and that is to make sure water comes out so people can wash their hands or whatever.
And speaking of budgeting and crunching the numbers, you did pretty well on keeping to budget on your Mount Druitt renovation, didn't you? I think you wrote an article about it years ago and you only went over by a minuscule amount
I think it's like
memory.
a couple of $100. I think we budgeted 15 grand I think, and I haven't looked at it for quite some time, but I think it was 15 grand and we said we'd renovate it over a 3-day period or a long weekend. So we gutted it, put a new kitchen, new bathroom, new floors like carpets and stuff. And we painted it with some new light switches and stuff. So that was a really focused strategic plan that we had. We said that we wanted to lift the rent from X to Y, and we knew that if we created that product, that similar properties in that block and along that stretch in Mount Druitt, which is right near the Westfields, had a market, pricing of X. So we went in there knowing exactly what we're going to achieve, and a lot of it was done on the basis of a spreadsheet and making sure we kept costs down, kept labour costs down, did as cheaply as possible.
So I think one of the really important things when investors are renovating is making sure that your new property, your renovated property, fits with the area. There's no point in making a Mount Druitt apartment that's then going to be out of the price range of people who live there. So Steph, do you research the areas that you are now renovating to make sure that your renovations fit with the demographic who's going to want to live there or buy it when you go to sell it?
Definitely. I think Phil touched on a really important point, as when you're renovating to move in, it's a completely different renovation than if you're renovating to resell or just keep it as an investment. And I think that is really the mistake that people make. But when you're looking at buying property at all, whether you're renovating and flipping or you're buying to hold, it's really important to look at what's the demographic of where you're buying, because something that's, for example, in Bondi near the beach, that'd be fine for a 1-bedroom, but something up in North Shore, is going to be better suited to a 2-bedroom or more, because the demographic is simply older. So it's really important to look at that, whether you're investing in any form.
Are you doing any of the work yourself on your properties? Like you said, you're sort of sourcing stuff like vanities and that, but are you actually getting your hands dirty, sort of rubbing back walls or getting paint on yourself and that sort of thing?
I haven't with these two, only because having a business, it's sort of hard to, I guess, replace yourself out of that and spend the time sort of spending a week on renovating. It's something that I would like to do, but I want to sort of get familiar and sort of watch what other people do and then look at replicating it first. And fortunately, I found a builder that's really cost effective. So it's what's my time worth and what's his time worth and where is it best spent?
Yeah, it's a really important point. I like renovating, but I shouldn't be doing $25 an hour jobs sort of on a property. Number one, I should be doing sort of spending my time where it's going to create a lot more value. So you need to be really specific about the value you're going to get by doing any of the work yourself. And also, I don't want to renovate on weekends. I've got a young family that I want to spend time with, so I would prefer to pay someone to do it. And number one, they probably do a much better job than I can, because they do it every single day, and therefore they're faster and they could probably get better access to materials. But on the flip side of that, if you are doing a lot of renovations, and it sounds like you're doing it, you actually get a bit of scale as well. So if you can provide regular work for a builder, you're going to be a preferential client for them. So when you need stuff done, they're going to do it, and they're going to prioritise your stuff as well.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
The time of a renovation is just as important as what the renovation is itself. So, I could have spent $15,000 on a renovation. It took me 3 months to do versus $15,000 in 3 days. So if I didn't have anyone in that property for a period of time, that's not rent that I'm receiving, and therefore I've got the holding costs associated with a renovation. Do you sort of factor that into your renos as well? Are you really tight on your timing and actually understand what the full cost is? That
Definitely.
is the reno plus the time plus the coffees and bacon and egg rolls that you got to pay guys to get them there.
I work it even down to, what am I going to be paying on stamp duty on the next purchase? Because if I sell in a short period of time, then I've got to look at, I've got the stamp duty cost, I've got agent fees, I've got legal fees, and then also the holding cost. So I look at all of that, and if there's not going to be enough of a profit margin, then I wouldn't look at it. But if there is, it's sort of like, how can I replace my income faster and consolidate the debt on the other properties that I have faster? And if it works out, then it's certainly a viable option.
Interesting. I want to get back. We've touched on it really briefly about you Gen Ys. And I'm a Gen Xer, and I'll probably open a can of worms here, but I think you both make a really good point. So you just pick up anything these days, and people are complaining about it's impossible to get in the property as a young person. It's a lot harder, It hasn't changed much since I was young. I'm sort of a decade or so older than you guys, but it's always been difficult for people to buy their first property. And I think there's a level of sophistication coming out of millennials who are a lot more open to the idea of their first property being an investment property. So they actually want to live in a particular area, and they know that to live in that area, you probably can't buy in that area, particularly when you've sort of got a new career and you're not making a lot of money and all this sort of stuff. So buying a property as an investment property first and foremost, I think that's a really good idea for a lot of Gen Ys. But you're saying, Viv, that there's a lot of pushback. People say it's absolutely impossible. I can't get in. The world's against me. I hate everything. What am I going to do? But then you've got Stephanie here who are just getting it done. So what is it, do you think, that there's such a polar difference between all the noise you get from Gen Ys, and then you've got the people actually out there doing it, and you can invest in property for a couple of $100,000, right?
I love debating this question because I just feel like I'm in such a great position for it, because I work for a publishing house media company that is so invested in real estate and property investment. But then I also, have a lot of friends who have really valid points about how difficult it is. And, I was at a BIS shrapnel conference the other day where they were forecasting what's going to happen next. And one of their main points was, Gen Y just aren't willing to live out on the fringes. They want the inner city lifestyle, and they were sort of framing it that way. But I think that the point that perhaps they missed is that a few generations ago we could discover those suburbs. Kellyville was quite rural, and there were these pockets that weren't discovered yet. I'm not sure that there's anywhere left for Generation Y in Sydney to discover. We're not going to suddenly, no one's heard of Glebe, or Glebe's being gentrified. That's new and different. So I think that's why a lot of us have turned to vesting, I guess, renting where we want to live and buying where we can afford. But I think it's another interesting point is I talked about this with my parents. They bought their first property in the really early 90s in Chiswick, the sort of inner west on the water there. Look, it would boggle the mind to talk about how little they paid for that property. But they were paying interest of 17.5%, 18.5%. So whenever I go off at mum about how they were really lucky and they've since moved to Abbotsford, which is the suburb next door, and I think they got into that for $300,000, and it would now be worth in excess of, $2 million. And they've done some renovations on it, and it's obviously appreciated in time. But yes, the money they paid was comparatively smaller, but the interest rates they were paying, they were raising two young kids. It was the early 90s. Mum was working part-time. Dad wasn't very old, so he wouldn't have been on great money, and they were paying 18%. So she has a really valid point as well that, yes, it's different, but, geez, I don't know that it would have been easy back then either.
I don't think it's easy. I think it's a contextual thing. A similar story. My mum says that when they moved into their house, which she still lives, they for the first couple of years of their life, they had two sort of like lawn chairs and a card table was their dining table. Like they went without, right? And that was, a product of that generation, and it's different times and all that. But Stephanie, so two questions: have you gone without in order to do what you've done today? And then the second part of that question is that working with people who are millennials or Generation Ys that want to create wealth, how many of them are actually willing not to have that overseas experience? How many of them are willing not to go out and get pissed every night? How many of them are willing not to go and have all the fanciest iPhone and whatever else? It's a perception thing. So can you have both? Can you have all this great stuff, which is the modern way, and can you also be a property investor as a Gen Y?
I think eventually you can have it all, but you can't have it all at the start, and you really need to work your way up and build up. And, there's plenty of things that I went without. I've learned to cut my hair ever since I was 15. I don't spend money on that. I still, even though I have the money, don't spend money on that because I want to look at paying down and investing more. So there's a lot of things that I have gone without, but I think the main problem with millennials and Gen Ys is they're not willing to sacrifice. I mean, there's a lot of people in fine dining restaurants that you see that are under 30, and it's sort of like, yes, maybe if you do that, not every night of the week or, less, then maybe you could afford a property. But I think the shift towards rent vesting is I guess, a reflection on society. Back in, my mum's era, she bought her first property when she was 21 in Manly Vale, actually, virtually across the road from where I bought my first. And it was interesting because, back when she bought it, that was expensive at the time. And as Viv said, she was paying, I think at one point, 21% interest. And, she didn't go out. She had steak and slices of pineapple. That's all she could afford, and tuna cans. So, and my sister, who bought her first place when she was 19 in Alexandria, which back then you wouldn't touch it, but, she was eating tuna cans and things like that because she couldn't afford anything else. When I lived in my first place, you know, I got my groceries down to $50 a week because I simply couldn't afford anything else. And, you know, when I rented it out, then that was a lot less pressure on myself because, you know, you're not paying all the mortgage yourself, and, you know, it's still easy enough to get into the market if you're willing to put in the effort. I mean, I looked at a property just before coming here that was in Freshwater, 350,000. Now, okay, it's the square meterage is quite small, but there's still, you know, properties that you can find that aren't ridiculously priced in Sydney, on the northern beaches or on the North Shore, even in Bondi. But it's whether you're willing enough to put the work in and actually go for it.
To be fair for millennials, you know, if you look at the stats, and we sort of got them on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, but the wage earning capacity of people today versus the value of property, it's a lot wider than what it used to be.
And wage growth has sort of stagnated. I mean, we've been really lucky in Australia, I think, 21, 22 years now without a recession.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty unheard of. We are pretty lucky, but wage growth, look, is slowing down. You know, so people do have valid concerns. Definitely,
it's a big gap now between, you know, comparatively what people used to earn compared to how much it used to cost to buy a house.
Yeah,
your parents' generation, and my parents' generation. So there is that point, you know, to take into consideration. So, you know, I don't want to beat up Gen Ys about this because it is tougher in some circumstances. Look, you've got all-time low interest rates on the other hand, so it all sort of balances out.
But Phil, I think you're interesting because you often talk about how, you know, when you were in your 20s, you were gallivanting around Europe and, you know, going out and having a good time and drinking beer and all that. So you obviously didn't go without, my understanding.
No.
And now you are you got to your 30s and, you know, moving into your 40s, investing. So, but you also always say that you wish you'd started sooner. So
sure. Does
that mean that you regret the time in your 20s having fun, or would you really take that back?
No way.
Yeah.
Not in the slightest. You know, it's like I would have loved to have got it earlier. And I guess that's the point I'm making with Gen Ys and millennials, whatever you want to call them. If you get it, you can do something about it. If you don't get it, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, go out and spend your 20s doing whatever. You know, go and get some experiences, you know, get your stories and stuff. That's cool. But the longer you leave it, the harder it's going to be. Point number one. How long are we going to have these interest rate environment? Probably for a little while, but, you know, interest rates will go up at some point in time. And I think also where we are today versus where we were 20 years ago, 40 years ago as a country and the way in which the world has evolved over that period of time. You know, Sydney now is a major global city. It's a major Asian city. So is Melbourne. It's not going to be cheap to live here. You've got more people wanting to live in Sydney than what we have houses to accommodate them. So what happens as a result of that? Property becomes a premium and therefore it goes up in value. So that's the reality that we live in right now. For Gen Ys and stuff, I think what you're doing, Steph, is really smart. You know, you're trying to help educate them about the opportunities. And I absolutely agree with you. To do anything in life, you need to go without. You've got to go without for something. So you've got to make that choice. What do you want? And how do you want it? But this whole idea of living where you want to live and rent there and invest where it's the right place to invest, I think that's a great option for a lot of people. If you want to be a homeowner or invest in property in Australia, you can do it, even on a salary where you've just started out in your career. You just need to know where to buy and how to buy and the process for doing that. So that's sort of my
I mean, we've had people contact us who really don't earn a lot, you know, 40, 50K a year, you know, before tax and before expenses, and they have found a way to invest. So I guess the anecdotal evidence is there. It is possible, but I obviously, as a Generation Y, also really understand the struggles, and I think that both sides of the argument have a valid point, but I would like the Gen Y bashing to stop because we're just not that bad.
I'm not going to bash you guys. I'm going to give you a hard time. No, I think it's cool. It's good. But you can do it if you want to do it. If you want to do it, you can do it.
Definitely.
If you don't want to do it, don't worry about it. Do something else. It's fine. You can sort it out later on in life. That's what I did, you know. And whether you're buying today, you're going to buy in 10 years, there's always going to be options. It's always a good time to invest in property. That's what you need to know about this. If you can't afford to invest in property today, but you want to start thinking about it, look at what you need to do in order to achieve that. Now, to invest in property, you need a deposit. Simple. So how do you get that deposit? Do you save your money? And you do that by eating baked beans and dollar loaves of bread, and that's cool. It sounds like you did that, Steph. You know, that's the way you got going. You sacrificed. But there's other ways you can raise deposits as well. You know,
definitely.
You can tap your parents up, speak to a good mortgage broker. But, you know, you can get your parents to become guarantor on loans and all this sort of stuff. And fortunately for Gen Ys, I guess your parents are sort of they're either baby boomers or older Gen Xers. They've probably got a bit of equity in it property because, they've been living a high life for a little while and property prices are going up in value. So tap them up and ask them for some cash so you can start investing.
So Linda and Paul, if you're listening, that's an official...
It's a message to Linda and Paul.
That's an official instruction from Phil Tarrant.
They're probably in Abbotsford.
Yes,
Abbotsford.
yeah, they're
Sure
sitting
it's
on... that mortgage was paid off quite a long time ago, so they are sitting on a bit of a gold mine at the moment.
But you think about it, right? You can buy up in... there's lots of places you can buy, like Broken Hill, for example. And I was looking at this the other day, and the average property out there is like $120,000 or $130,000. I wouldn't be recommending to invest in Broken Hill, by the way. It's Australia's most affordable place, but as an investment location, I probably wouldn't be going there. But there's some exceptional locations and areas in sort of South Brisbane where you can get into the property market for a couple of $100,000. You're just saying Freshwater, which is right near Manly Beach, sort of $350 for a studio or something or other.
A one better.
A one better.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of money. What do you need? A 10% deposit plus all your financials. If you save yourself 40, 45, 50 grand, you're in the game.
So I think it is really easy for us to get so caught up in the Sydney side of things. I mean, we live here and it's what's always on the news. But just to jump back, Steph, when we talked about how your strategy had sort of evolved since we spoke to you back in April, one of the things you said was you started renovating and flipping. But you also sort of mentioned that you've been investing in commercial spaces overseas, New York and San Fran, from memory from our chat just outside. So can you talk us through that? I don't think there'd be many 25-year-old investors with commercial spaces in San Fran and New York.
Yeah, sure. So I really wanted to understand different markets because I think, Sydney is a very strong market, but there's other opportunities in other places in the world. And San Fran is actually one place that their property market is very similar to Sydney. So I thought that was a fairly conservative bet. And I was just over in San Fran actually last week, and the government's considering releasing startup visas, which would drive prices up, and these commercial spaces are aimed at co-working spaces for young entrepreneurs, and they're something that will go up in value. It's a 99-year lease, but they've got a really good return on them, and I thought, I want to try different things, not just residential but commercial and certainly international markets, and then I can utilise that knowledge for not only my own portfolio but other people's as well.
I mean, I love San Fran, and Phil, you've just gotten back from there yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, San Fran's cool. Certainly got a buzz about the place. There's a lot of techie entrepreneur, cool people out there. It's a good vibe. I like San Fran. It's a very livable city. Like most things, you need to look at what makes a good investment for property, and it's about wage growth. It's about job growth. It's about sort of diversified economies. It's about all these type of things. And San Fran, pockets of San Fran have those indicators. So, whether it's San Francisco or whether it's Sydney, you need to be looking for the same stuff. We've run out of time.
Oh, we always do.
It's turn. I always enjoy these podcasts because we never really know where we're going to go with them. But
I didn't know we'd be tackling the Generation Y debate, but I'm glad that we did.
Look, if anyone wants to participate in that debate, come on in. Maybe we can do a special podcast, the great debate, Gen X and baby boomers versus Gen Y, and I'll argue on the side of Gen Y because I think there's a lot of validity to a lot of the concerns that Gen Ys have, and I think most people get that. You can be quite cynical about Gen Ys, and you said 21 years without a recession. They've always had it good, and sort of that. But you know what? I haven't had it tough either. I'm a Gen Xer. It's been pretty good. So, but I think it's about, and the points I would make to sort of summarise this podcast is about compromise, isn't it? You got to work out what you want. If you want to invest in property, you're going to have to make sacrifices to do it. It's just how big those sacrifices are, and really understanding why you want to get in property. And if you don't get into property today, you can get in property tomorrow. So you'd probably be okay at the end of the day. But get educated. Read smartpropertyinvestment.com. Is that your recommendation for all Gen Ys, Viv?
That is my recommendation. My key takeaway from today is go to smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, but also for Linda and Paul to tap into that equity.
There we go. Let's catch up on that. Do you want to do a podcast?
Yeah.
Maybe let's do a case study, Viv, about how you can hit your parents up for becoming a guarantor.
That would be great.
All of Australia knows now you're under pressure, but that would be quite entertaining. Stephanie, thanks for coming again. Really cool.
Thanks for having me.
Look, I love the story. I like your drive. I like your commitment to what you're doing, both on a personal level with creating wealth through property, but also supporting your peer group to try and achieve the same. So I think you've got some challenges ahead of you, and imagine you probably get into a lot of debates with people about the realities of investing in property and what you need to give up in order to do it if you're a bit younger on in life. But I think if we get more voices and advocates like yourself to actually champion these causes and better educate people, I think collectively everyone's going to do better. So, and Viv, keep doing what you're doing in terms of leading the charge for Gen Ys and giving good, balanced editorial.
I will.
All we ask from you guys is make sure they're 5-star rating on iTunes, even if you don't agree with my views towards Gen Ys. But I think I'm pretty impartial, to be fair. But leave them there. Let us know what you think about the show. Also, any questions, you can email us at editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. We're also on all the social channels, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. You can follow me at Philip Tarrant to see what I'm up to in terms of property.
And just a quick shout out as well, if you want to come on the show, please also email us at editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. If you've been listening to the 45 odd episodes we've done and you're enjoying it, why not come on yourself and have a chat to us?
Yeah, particularly Gen Ys and Gen X's. If you feel a particular way, let's do a bit of a group one and see how we go. It might be a bit messy, but I'm sure we can have some fun. Thanks for coming on, guys. Really appreciate it. Tune in next week. Till then, see you later. Bye.